student-assisted medical and dental applications, a society at Barts and the London School of Medicine and Dentistry. But you can call us SAMDA. As a society, we are dedicated to support schools, colleges, and sixth form students in their first step towards a career in medicine or dentistry. We conduct school visits to give you that personal guidance, clinicians' evenings with prestige alumni and professionals, skills days to equip you with all the skills to ace the application, mock interviews with students and clinicians to give you that first-hand experience and get you ahead of the game, a buddy scheme so that we at SAMDA can support you every single step of the way, weekly tips on our social media to give you some bite-sized and concise wisdom and advice. If that's not all, our extensive SAMDA medicine and dentistry guide and much, much more. Check out our social media and stay up to date. We are only a click away.
So hi everyone, and welcome to our live stream today. My name is Padma, and I'm a dental student at Barts. I'm also the co-president for SAMDA.
Hi everyone, I'm Kong. I'm a second year medical student. I'm a vice president for SAMDA.
So today we are your hosts for this introduction to UCAT event. So this evening with us, we have Medic Mind and UCAT official, and they'll be delivering insightful talks about the UCAT, the key dates, resources that you can use, techniques to answer questions, and they'll be also going through some example questions for you. So this event is open to all students, so please feel free to share the link to this live stream with anyone who you think would benefit. The link to this would have been given to you at the end of the sign-up form, but you can also find it on our Instagram page in our bio. So our Instagram is barts_samda, so you can also find it there. Okay, so now I will talk a little bit more about SAMDA and who we are. So we are a student-run society based at Barts and the London, and our aim is to support sixth form students from local state schools as they take the first steps towards a career in medicine or dentistry. So as a widening participation society, we aim to level the playing field, and we do this by providing free resources to students and free events such as UCAT events, BMAT events, taster days into medicine and dentistry, as well as mock interviews. So to keep up to date with our events, make sure to follow us on Instagram and also subscribe to our YouTube channel where we will be uploading recordings of some of our events. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to Kong, who will take you through the itinerary for the day, safeguarding, and some information on how to submit questions.
Right, so here is the itinerary for today. As you can see, we have two main talks, one by UCAT official and the other one by Medic Mind. So UCAT official will provide a brief overview of the UCAT, including key dates for 2022, bursaries and assess arrangements, how to prepare for the test, and also how to use your UCAT results to make your university choices. And then Medic Mind will go through each of the sections in the UCAT test and show you some techniques on how to answer them and go through some practice questions in each of these sections via Menti. Right. And so since this is an event that we are aiming towards under 18s, you guys, so we will need some safeguarding measures in. So in terms of reporting inappropriate activity, please email us about the inappropriate activity and also CC in your school teacher. And also we have turned off YouTube comments and live chat because of as a safeguarding measure as well. But you can still interact and ask our speakers any questions you like in the live Q&A session. by submitting your questions to our Instagram story. More about this later. So all participant information will remain confidential, but when you do submit a question, make sure you don't put any of your personal information within the question as well. And if you have any general questions that are not specific to the UCAT, but are about SAMDA events or the application process, please email us with your teacher copied in, and we will answer your questions there. Right. And so on our SAMDA Instagram, there will be a story about where you can put in your question and ask us for the event. However, for the talk by Medic Mind, there will be a Mentimeter, and it will be better if you guys ask the question on Menti instead of Instagram story. So this is more for questions for UCAT official. Right. So now I'm gonna hand it back to my colleague Padma.
Okay, so thank you, Kong. Now, I just want to bring your attention to these free resources that Medic Mind has kindly offered to provide for all students who attend this live stream. So you'll be having, you can get access to these free resources that are there on the screen by filling out a form at the end of this live stream. So please make sure that you stay till the end to be able to access these resources. Okay, so this is the end of our little section here of the live stream. And now I will hand over to our speaker from UCAT official, Helen. So Helen is responsible for the delivery of the UCAT, and she's part of the UCAT office that manages the UCAT on behalf of a consortium of UK universities that require this test for entry into their medical and dental programs. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Helen.
Hi, thanks Padma. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Hello everybody, thank you for being here for this talk about the UCAT. I'm going to start a presentation in a moment. I'm going to talk for maybe around 20 minutes, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end where I can answer your questions. I'm going to be covering quite a lot of information in the presentation, but don't be worried about trying to write it all down. We can share the presentation with SAMDA, and all of the information is on our website and in our official guide, and we'll have some links to that at the end of the presentation. Okay, Padma, is that working okay?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'll get started then. So I'm Helen. I work in the UCAT office and I manage the delivery of the UCAT for the consortium. I'm going to talk really about an overview of the UCAT, what the test is and who uses it. I'll give you the key dates for the 2022 test cycle and how to register for it. I'll talk to you about fees and how to apply for our bursary scheme, how to put in place any access arrangements you might need to sit the test. We'll have a brief overview of the test and how it's scored. And then more importantly, I think we'll move on to how you should prepare for the test, what your test day is going to be like, and how you get your results. So the UCAT's an admissions test which is used by a consortium of UK medical and dental schools. They use it to help make informed choices from amongst the large number of kind of highly qualified applicants that they get each year. The test isn't a test of knowledge, it's an aptitude test. So it's looking at assessing a range of mental abilities that these universities believe are important. It's not used in isolation though, so universities will use this with other parts of their selection process. They'll take it into account alongside aspects such as your predicted grades, the information that they have on your UCAS application, and of course your interview score if you get through to interview. So the UCAT's a computer-based test. It's multiple choice and the standard test is 2 hours. You'll sit the test in the same year that you apply through UCAS. So this means that if you're planning to apply to UCAS this year for October 2023 entry, then you'll be sitting the test this summer. It's worth noting that you can only sit the test once each year. So you really need to make sure that you're ready to sit it by your test day. The test is delivered by our business partner called Pearson VUE, and they have a number of test centres across the UK where you're booked to sit your test. The test itself assesses a range of mental abilities, and it's across 5 separately timed subtests, but we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on. So the slide you're seeing now is a list of the current 33 universities that require the UCAT as part of their entry requirements. You can find the full list on our website together with the courses at those institutions that require a test result. There's too many really to put on this slide, so your best bet really is to go to the website and have a look there and see if the course that you're interested in at the particular university requires the UCAT. So these are the key dates for 2022. As you can see, we're currently open for registration and booking. Registering for the test is a really simple two-step process. So step 1 is you create an account, and that will give you a unique candidate ID, which will allow you to book your test. Before you go ahead and book, we encourage you to think about whether you qualify for a bursary, which will allow you to take the test for free, and also think about whether you need to apply for any access arrangements if you're entitled to those in public exams. Step 2 in the process is actually booking your test, and we are open for booking now. So you'll log into your UCAT web account and you can use the test centre locator to find your most convenient test centre. So this year we're testing between the 11th of July and the 29th of September. So unlike other admissions tests, which are delivered on one day of the year, you've got the option with the UCAT of sitting your test on a date and time that's convenient for you. But do take a note of the deadlines, because these are firm and we don't move them at all. So the last testing date is the 29th of September, and you need to have booked your test by the 22nd of September to be able to sit the test this year. You'll have sat your test then by the end of September, which means you'll have your results before you need to submit your UCAS application, which is important. If you're taking the test in the UK, the cost is £70. However, we do offer a bursary scheme to candidates who are in financial need. So if you're from a low-income household and you meet any of these eligibility criteria, they're listed on the slide there. So if you're in receipt of a 16 to 19 bursary from your school, or if you get free school meals, or perhaps your parents are in receipt of a means tested benefit, then you should qualify to receive our bursary. It's a really simple online application process. So you submit a short application and you upload your evidence, and if you are approved, we send you a bursary voucher which you can use to pay for your test. It's definitely worth applying, even if you're unsure. Make an application with your evidence and then we can advise you. So if you're normally entitled to things like extra time or rest breaks or any other accommodations in your school or college exams, then we should be able to offer you a version of the UCAT which should meet your needs. So access arrangements need to be applied for online with your supporting evidence, and you really should be doing that before you book your test. Full details are on our website. You'll need some evidence from your school or college, so be sure to look into this before term ends so that you can get your evidence ready so that you can get your test booked. So we'll now move on and have a look at the test format. So the UCAT's made up of 5 subtests. The first 4 are what we call the cognitive subtests, and the 5th one is a subtest of situational judgment. So the standard UCAT is 2 hours in length, with 5 separately timed subtests, as you can see. Each subtest has a minute of instruction time, which you can use before each subtest starts to kind of clear your mind and get ready for the next one. The number of questions varies in each subtest, and they're given on the table there. It's often the time constraints of the test that candidates find quite challenging. So this is something that you definitely need to factor into your preparation and manage carefully during your test. We'll now move on and look through each individual subtest. So the first subtest in the UCAT is verbal reasoning. In this subtest, you've got 21 minutes to answer 44 questions. These will be associated with 11 passages of text. So each passage you get will have 4 questions associated with it. The topics of the passages can be quite varied, but you're not expected to use any prior knowledge to answer the questions. Try and forget anything you might think you already know about the subjects and really only use the information provided within the passage. This subtest really is assessing your ability to digest and think carefully about information presented to you. You'll need to use critical reasoning skills, make inferences and draw conclusions quickly. The timing of this subtest is quite challenging, so focus on pacing yourself and try to work your way through every question in the time given. Speed reading skills are quite important for verbal reasoning, so activities like reading newspaper articles and trying to pull out key facts quickly are a really useful part of your preparation. The second subtest is decision making, and in this subtest you'll have 31 minutes to answer 29 questions. Each of these questions are standalone, they don't share data between them, and the questions may be associated with text passages or with diagrams or charts or graphs. There's quite a wide variety of different question types within decision making. You'll see, for example, logical puzzles, syllogisms, Venn diagrams, and incomplete statement questions. They are all assessing your ability to apply logic to reach a decision or conclusion. It's important to familiarise yourself with each type of question in decision making when you prepare. Excuse me. You may find it useful to make notes during this subtest, and you'll be given a whiteboard and pen at the test centre, which you can use to jot down any notes that you might need to make. Quantitative reasoning is the third subtest. In this one, you've got 25 minutes to answer 36 questions. And these will be associated with numerical data presented in formats such as tables, graphs, or charts. Although you need familiarity with numbers for this subtest, this section really is assessing your ability to solve problems using your numerical skills. We do assume a familiarity up to GCSE level maths. So if you haven't studied maths for a little while, that's fine, but we would recommend you brush up on aspects of maths such as ratios, fractions, and percentages. And you'll see what kind of mathematical kind of maths that you'll need when you work through the question bank. You're provided with a basic calculator for use in this subtest, so make sure you practice using this on-screen calculator to make sure you're familiar with how it works. Using the calculator in conjunction with some mental math skills on some questions may help to save you time, so it's always good to brush up on your mental math skills. Once again, you'll have a noteboard and pen for this section, which may be useful for jotting down your calculations. If you've run out of space in your noteboard from working through decision making and you need another one, just raise your hand and the invigilator will bring you one. Excuse me. The fourth and final subtest is abstract reasoning. The final cognitive subtest is abstract reasoning. This is one of the shortest subtests in the UCAT. You've got just 12 minutes to answer 50 questions. There are a number of different kind of question types within this subtest. So it's definitely worth working through the question bank to familiarise yourself with those. This subtest is looking at your ability to identify patterns amongst abstract information. In many questions, there may be irrelevant or distracting material. So you need to be able to critically generate and evaluate hypotheses and change track in order to reach the correct conclusion quickly. Don't be concerned though if you find this subtest quite challenging as you start your preparation. It might be quite different to anything that you've come across before. The key to this subtest is completing lots of the practice questions, and the more questions you complete, the quicker you'll be able to spot patterns or rules that you can apply to work out the correct answer. The final subtest is a test of situational judgment, or the SJT as we more commonly refer to it. In this subtest, you've got 26 minutes to answer 66 questions, and time management is a less critical factor in this subtest. You'll be presented with various scenarios and a number of questions associated with each scenario. These questions are really designed to assess your capacity to understand real-world situations and determine how you would deal with them in terms of assessing critical factors and deciding on appropriate behaviour. These questions are assessing what we consider to be important traits for future doctors and dentists, such as integrity, perspective taking, communication, team involvement, professionalism, resilience and adaptability. For this subtest, we recommend that you read the General Medical Council's guidelines on good medical practice, particularly if you're struggling with answering some of these questions. These guidelines, produced by the GMC, describe the professional values and behaviours they expect from any doctor registered with them, and it may help to give you a useful perspective on approaching these questions. So now we've had a quick run through of what's in the test. Let's just kind of talk about how we think you should prepare for the UCAT. So although there's no curriculum content to revise, because it's a test of aptitude rather than academic knowledge, you really still need to dedicate some time to prepare for it and make sure that you're ready for that test day, because as I said, you only get one chance to sit the test each year. High scoring candidates have reported to us that they spend at least 25 to 30 hours preparing for the test. So based on this, we recommend you start at least 6 weeks before your test date. And quite often, little and often is what we're told kind of works best, rather than trying to kind of cram it all into the last minute. The best way to prepare is by using the free resources on the UCAT website, which I'll go through in a moment. We often get asked about which kind of coaching company to use. There are quite a number of kind of commercial training companies out there offering coaching in the UCAT. We can't really comment on the quality of any of these materials, and therefore we don't endorse them. We don't work with these companies, so the materials that they're developing are based on their guesswork of what's in the test. So our only recommendation is that you use the official free resources on the website. Otherwise, you might not get an accurate picture of the test. Our preparation resources are all free. You can use them as many times as you like. You don't need to sign up for them in any way. So certainly start your preparation working through all of those to start with, and then perhaps see where there are gaps in your knowledge and where you might need to look for other free resources. So in terms of preparing, we recommend you start by looking at the preparation plan. This will kind of guide you through the resources that we have on our website, and help you get the most out of them and use them in the most effective way. It's worth starting after that with the tutorials. So we've got 2 tutorials. The tour tutorial will take you through the kind of technical functions of sitting a computer-based test. And then we have a question tutorial, which will work you through each of the individual subtests, and give you some strategies for approaching each of the various question types. It'll give you a really good overview of the question types that are in the test. On our website, we've got a huge question bank with hundreds and hundreds of practice questions. It's worth working your way through those and familiarising yourself with the question types and how to answer them. Those questions have all got answer rationales, so that's quite helpful in terms of looking at what the question writers are aiming for with particular questions. It'll give you a good insight into how to answer questions. The test tools page on our website will take you through things like the calculator, note-taking, shortcuts and things like that. And then we've got 4 fully timed practice tests that you can use, and I think it's really important to use those under timed conditions, so that you're getting the best out of those practice tests and you're really assessing how you're doing, and how your kind of timekeeping is doing across the test. There are lots of tips and advice for taking the UCAT, but I thought we'd just cover a few that seem to work well for people. As I've said, becoming familiar with the timings in the test is really important, and having a strategy for how you work through each subtest in the time allotted to cover all the questions within that subtest. We don't do any negative marking, so if you are stuck for an answer, use your best guess. You won't lose any points for that, and it could be a right answer. A lot of candidates use the flag and review function in the test to manage their time. You can practice that within the question banks and within the practice tests. It's useful if you're uncertain about a particular answer and you don't want that question to sort of slow you down. You can flag it and then come back to it at the end of that subtest if you have time. The practice tests, as I've said, we really would recommend that you save those for the end, so that you've got to grips with how the test works, what's going to be in the test, and you have 4 really good opportunities to sit the test under timed conditions before you have your test day. So on your test day, some of these are common sense, some of these are important to know beforehand. So don't be late, otherwise you won't be allowed to test and you'll have to pay to book another test. The test centre doesn't waive this, so make sure you know where you're going and when you need to be there. You need official ID to sit our test, so study the ID policy. This will be in your booking confirmation email, and make sure that you obtain that ID before your test day so that you're ready to take that with you. Otherwise you won't be allowed to test. It's definitely worth familiarising yourself with the candidate exam rules, which are on our website. These cover important information such as what to do if you are experiencing an issue during a test. You'll be expected to read and sign these before you enter the test room. So knowing about them before your test day is useful. Remember that the test room, it's not like a school exam. There'll be other people in the test room taking different exams, and they may be entering and leaving the test room. The invigilators will ensure that any disturbance is kept to a minimum, and you can ask for earplugs if you want to minimise disturbance. And if you do encounter any problems, make sure that you notify the invigilator immediately so that they can take action. So in terms of scoring and results, results are available on the day of your test. So as soon as you leave the test room, you'll be given a copy of your score. And this is also available through your UCAT web account within 24 hours of your test. This means that you're going to know your result before you submit your UCAS application. So once you have your result, it's worth looking at your preferred universities, because how they use the test can vary widely between each university. For example, some may apply a threshold score either for the cognitive tests or the SJT. So it's really important to research this for the universities you're considering applying to avoid wasting one of your application choices. The UCAT score is comprised of 2 parts. So for each of the cognitive subtests, you'll receive a score of between 300 and 900, giving you a total score of between 1,200 and 3,600. And then for the situational judgment part of the test, you'll receive a banding, with band 1 being the highest and band 4 being the lowest. Towards the middle of September, we will be publishing some interim stats on candidate performance. And then once testing ends on the 29th of September, we'll publish some final test statistics on the website. So you'll be able to look at those and have a fairly good indication of how well you've performed. We'll also have a percentile lookup on the website so that you can see how you've performed in relation to all the other candidates this year. In terms of passing your result onto your university choices, We do that. So once testing has ended, we liaise with UCAS to match your UCAT data to your UCAS application and to obtain the university choices that you've applied to from UCAS, and then we will pass your scores directly to your chosen universities in early November. So you don't need to do anything, you don't need to give us any data. We do all that with UCAS and then pass your result on. So that's the end of my talk. As I've said, all the information is on the website, ucat.ac.uk. There's a QR code on this slide, which will take you to our 2022 UCAT official guide. If you wish to, we've got some social media accounts which you can follow us, and you'll be able to see some extra practice questions and all the important updates for the 2022 test cycle. So it just leaves me now to say, are there any questions from anybody? And I can answer those now.
Right. Hi, Helen.
I think I'm stopped sharing now. Apologies for my croaky voice as well.
Yeah, no, you did a good job. Thanks. So we have a question. Just one. Is each section timed and will run out, or do we have to manage our time for each section by ourselves?
No. So each of the subtests in the UCAT is separately timed. You'll have the timer on the test, and that will count down for you. And when you've reached the end of the section, it will tell you, and you will then move on to the next subtest. Definitely don't hang around at the end of subtest. You'll get an on-screen message that will tell you time's run out. You need to move on promptly, otherwise you'll start losing time from the next sections. So yeah, you don't have to manage your time yourself. The test will do that for you.
Right. Thanks, Helen. Sorry, but just another question popped up. What do we do if you get a bad UCAT score and decide not to apply to medicine or dentistry?
Well, so there's not a pass or a fail with the UCAT. That obviously you'll get a kind of a score within that range. Different universities use the test in different ways, so it's definitely worth having a look at the universities. If you go on the Medical Schools Council website, they've got a really useful guide about applying to medicine, which covers kind of entry criteria and things like that. So definitely have a look and see. Some universities also give contextual offers as well for candidates from certain backgrounds. If you've really not done well, then you can always apply again next year and sit the test again next year. You'll have a year under your belt, and it might go better next time. What I would say about booking a test date is, book your date. If your test date's approaching and you feel you're not ready for it, you feel like you need some time, then you can reschedule your test. If you go into your web account and look and see if there are other appointment dates available. So it's definitely worth doing that if you feel you're not ready. It might give you maybe a few more days of preparation so that you can achieve a better result.
So I think this is a clarifying question. Will the UCAT score still be sent to the universities even if you don't apply to medicine though?
No. So like I said, we work with UCAS to match our data to their data. So if you've not applied to any UCAT universities that require the result, then nothing will happen with your test result this year.
Right. I think that's the end of the questions that we have. Okay. Thank you very much, Helen, for giving us your time this evening. I hope you have a really nice evening ahead.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sam.
So next up, we have Zainab, who is our Medic Mind tutor. that will be speaking today. She's a second-year medical student studying at the University of Glasgow. And yeah, I'll let her do the introductions herself.
Right. Hi, everyone. Feel free to call me Zuzu. So I'm a third-year medic at the University of Glasgow now, officially. Passed my exams, alhamdulillah. When I initially applied, I applied to UCL, King's, Cambridge, and Glasgow. I got offers from all 4 of my universities, which was amazing. And then I decided to go to Glasgow because it felt most like home. It felt really like my personality. And my chemistry teacher gave me really good advice in terms of picking my uni. She said, pick it as if you're picking your boyfriend, someone who's a good location away from you, who has nice professors, nice personality, someone who makes you feel like you want to spend 5 to 6 years with them. So never pick a uni just because of their names or you think they'll see more prestige, because in 10, 20 years' time, no one will care where you went as long as you've passed. So let's get started with how to prepare for the UCAT. I think you see my screen, but just so before we get started, just a bit of admin. Would you all mind opening Menti on your phones and typing in this code, 5192714. So if you go on your phones and just type in Menti, put this code in. Throughout, you'll be able to either like something or comment on something, and it will come up on the screen, so I'll be able to interact with you. Please do not put anything inappropriate. It will be automatically filtered out anyway. And we'll be going through some key tips around the key UCAT sections and things that I did. So when I did my UCAT, I honestly don't remember the exact score, but overall, as an average, I got 720. You'll see the more medical students you ask, the more they're not going to remember their score, because after you get into medical school, it honestly becomes irrelevant. It's just the hard part that you have to get through, and it will always give you PTSD. All right, so let's get started. First of all, let's get started with the timeline of applications. So you have the UCAT, the personal statement, the BEMA, and the interview. And it looks like they're all in these separate months. It looks like it's a planned out timeline, but unfortunately, that's not how it goes. The week of my BEMA, I had my mocks. Personal statements, you'll be getting back to school. They'll be giving you a lot of work, hit the ground running. Interviews, it's a lot to do over a long timeline. I had 2 or 3 of my interviews all in the same week. It's not as planned out. Life isn't as planned out as this. So always accommodate for backup plans. So once you get an interview from one university, for example, when I got my interview from UCL, I should have emailed Glasgow and said, I can't make it on that day. But I didn't. So I got my interviews literally a day apart, one on one evening, one on the next. So whenever you get an interview, make sure you plan your timeline around all of these different things. And also the other thing you want to do is plan your UCAT timeline. So it says July to September because you want to hit the ground running. You want to start studying straight away and pace yourself. Don't start with 10 hours a day. You'll burn out. We'll talk about the UCAT study plan later, but for now, what you need to know is this is the timeline of applications you'll be going through. So, how have you been preparing for the UCAT? I'm going to give you all a minute to put this up on your Mentis. How have you been preparing for the UCAT? I'm going to put my answer, but how I was preparing. So remember to answer this question, 5192714. Haven't started yet. Honestly, that was me. I'm going to tell you the story of how I did my UCAT later, but honestly, I can relate with that. Watching the Medic Mind seminar, I was doing some practice questions. Haven't done many of those yet. Yep, no worries. UCAT Ninja, UCAT website, videos on YouTube, how to answer each section, GMC for SJT, that's a really good tip. Just getting familiar with all subsections, yeah. So when I did my UCAT, I actually didn't want to do medicine. I hated medicine, and my parents were like, do medicine. And I was like, no, I don't want to do something because my parents told me to. I don't want to be the typical Arab cliche. And I wanted to do engineering. I did work experience in engineering, and I absolutely hated it. And I realized that the only part of my life I did enjoy was the time I spent at the care home and in hospitals volunteering. So I was like, oh, maybe I do like medicine and I shouldn't hate it as much. Maybe I should sit the UCAT. And this was 2 weeks before the deadline for the UCAT. So I did my UCAT study in 2 weeks. But honestly, that is not how you want it done. It was so much stress over 2 weeks. So I'm going to tell you the perfect way to do it, which is how I've been tutoring my students to do it over the last 2-3 years I've been tutoring. I've tutored for over 1,000 hours. So trust me, it works. And I'll take you through the study plan in a minute. For now, Medify. Okay, one thing about Medify. Last year, people who used Medify from my students who got Band 1 SJT ended up getting Band 3 in the real UCAT because Medify's questions are a bit outdated. I'd recommend different services. If you ask me in the Q&A, I'll let you know, but do not use Medify for SJT. And also, their QR questions are a bit harder or a bit misrepresented as well. And they have some mistakes in their AR patterns. A lot of their AR patterns don't actually come up in the real abstract reasoning section. So just be very careful with Medify. I wouldn't recommend it, but I will recommend some other ones. Anyway, let's get started with the next section. So, after have you been preparing for the UCAT, I wanted to take you through some tips around Helen already talked to you through when the UCAT is, how many sections it has, but how I revised. So, like I said, I'll share the study plan I had later, but the study plan I use with my students is a 6-week study plan. And I'll share the details of the study plan as we go along. But how I revise is I use different aspects of independent learning and one-to-one learning. So what I did is I watched videos, like you said, YouTube videos of the key techniques that I need. So I did a bit of an overview of each section, VR, DM, QR, AR. I just wanted to understand what this UCAT actually was. And then I used the official UCAT book, the Large Ultimate Guide to the UCAT. I went through it, almost all of it, to be honest, in those 2 weeks. Like I said, if you're starting now, you want to do it over 6 weeks. So what I would do if I were you is start with an overview of each section just to get the hang of it. So I do an overview of VR, QR, DM, AR, SJC, whatever it is. There are lots of YouTube videos to help you with overviews. Just get the general hang of what the sections actually mean, and then start timed practice. I like using Past Medicine. They have a free 6-month subscription. Past Medicine. It's free. You can even renew the membership for free. You can even use it in medical school, whatever it is. For 6 months, you get it for free. They have really representative practice, to be honest. And I started just practicing because practice will make perfect. And then I kept a tally of all the question types I got wrong. For example, in verbal reasoning, I filtered it into 5 different question types, and I kept a tally of the question types I would get wrong. And then I went back and looked for videos specific to the questions that I got wrong, because I knew my technique must have been flawed. And when I started, I struggled with timing so much. And I realized that all my friends were cutting down their timing so quickly, so I stressed and I started cutting my time. But then I realized there was no point rushing, cutting down the time if I didn't have the technique. So just stop rushing and saying, oh my God, I need to finish it within 29 seconds if this is the first or second week that you're working on this. Always focus on technique for the first 2 weeks before focusing on time, because there's no point cutting down your time if your technique isn't on point. So like I said, I watched some overview videos, did practice questions, kept a tally of the type of questions I got wrong, recapped the techniques for the type of questions I got wrong, and then went back and did the same process again and again until I didn't see any obvious flaws, until my mistakes were spread out across the question types. It wasn't about the question type, it wasn't about my technique, it was just a really difficult question. Because remember, this is an exam as much as, they want to sugarcoat it, it's designed to make you fail. So to cross this exam, where it's one of the most obstacles that people actually fall behind on or drop out of medical applications because of. To be able to conquer this obstacle, what you want to do is make sure that the flaw isn't in you, the flaw is in the exam. There are questions that will come up and they're called time waster questions. They're questions that are designed for you to waste your time on, to get them wrong. So as long as those are where you're getting your questions wrong, it's not a specific flaw or a specific question type, you're going down the right track. When do I revise? So I'm the kind of person that cannot focus for too long. I love procrastinating, love my Netflix, love chilling with my friends. I love having a work-life balance. I'm not the kind of person like study. So I spread it out so that I'd studied around 4 to 5 hours a day. over 6 weeks. That's if I did it in 6 weeks. But since I did it in 2 weeks, I had to do 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours. But that is not the right way to do it. Spread it over 6 weeks, do 4 or 5 hours a day, and build it up. So I get my students to start 2 hours a day, then next week starts 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, etc. Don't go straight away with the maximum number of hours. When I say hit the ground running, I mean start early. Slow and steady will win the race. Because the UCAT learning curve, if I just quickly draw out the learning curve, the UCAT learning curve will be a lot of ups and downs, but potentially you'll reach a peak and start dropping because you're just going to start burning out. You're just going to be like, I want to get this exam over and done with. So don't rush it because your peak will come really early, and you won't pass the exam. So let's go through when you revise, like we said, start 6 weeks early, build up your time. And just before the exam, so 2 days before the exam, I did 3 back-to-back mocks. Because what I realized in a lot of my mocks, I'll get to the end of it and I'll be like, oh, I don't need to practice SJT, I'll just skip it. Or I'll get to halfway through my mock and, you know what, I think I can just average out my score. I don't have to do the whole thing. And that made me realize that I don't have the mental stigma to like run this marathon. It's a marathon. I needed to train my brain to be able to work for the whole of the UCAT because I would just get tired. So I did in the week just before, I did 1 mock. Next day I did 2 back-to-back mocks, and then 3 back-to-back mocks, and then 3 back-to-back mocks again. So by the end of it, I'd done, 6 hours or 7 hours back-to-back, that when I sat an actual 2.5-hour exam, or 3-hour exam, depending on if you're doing SEN or not, it didn't seem like a lot. So make sure you train your brain, because you can't just run this on the first day. You can't just show up to the UCAT and not revise, not practice. You need to train your brain to be able to tolerate it for that long. Which universities use it? Helen already went through that. I'm not going to waste your time. All right, so Helen went through the key timings, but she didn't go through timings for specific questions. For example, verbal reasoning has 44 questions in 21 minutes, but in reality, you only have 28.7 seconds per question, but we round it up to 29 seconds just for the ease of it all. So these are the sections, like I said. So verbal reasoning, let's start with that. Verbal reasoning is like comprehension. You get an abstract, you get like a passage, you get a question, you answer it. It seems super simple. It's not that simple. We'll go through tips around it, but it's not that simple, because the first thing the UCAT do is they twist the meaning of true, they twist the meaning of false. They have something called an inference, which isn't a truth that's directly given to you in the passage. It's a truth that you're meant to infer somehow. So basically, verbal reasoning isn't as straightforward as it seems. Decision making, you have around 1 minute or 2 minutes per question, depending if it's a 5-part question like syllogisms, which are like the tongue twisters, where they give you like, all strawberries are humans, all humans are aliens, or some humans are dogs. Like, they will actually just twist your brain. Those are called syllogisms. They have 5 parts. They'll give you statements and you put yes or no. And those will have 2 minutes, because if they have 5 parts, you get 2 minutes to answer all 5 parts. But again, all my students have done this in 1 minute, so you can time yourself in all of decision making for 1 minute if it makes it easier. And decision making is like riddle. It's like these different puzzles, and we'll go through different types of questions that can come up. Quantitative reasoning is like a lot of maths, like at the end of your GCSE maths paper, where you're meant to get 6 minutes for this 6-mark question, which is super hard. They put that into the UCAT, except they only give you 40 seconds to answer it. So it's ridiculous. Anyway, we'll go through tips for that later. And abstract reasoning, you get under 10 seconds per question. It's absolutely horrible. Most people don't even finish the section by the end of the time. You don't even have time to look at the question, let alone answer it. But we'll go through tips and timing later. Anyway, so situational judgment is the most relaxed one. You get 23 seconds per question. And there are different types of questions that judge whether or not you're a good-hearted doctor. So whether you're dodgy or not, in simple words. All right. So how can we do 50 questions in 12 minutes? That's very time pressured. Okay. I know it's a lot, but we'll go through what a question would look like and how you'd cut down your time for it. For now, the first thing you need to do with the UCAT is get to grips with the test format. There's a lot of timing to remember. Like, a lot of people say, how am I meant to remember that it's 28.7 seconds per question for VR? Because you do a lot of practice that you basically have a mental timer in your head going beep, 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 beep. My sister did the UCAT and she tried to get a watch that would beep every 30 seconds, but she couldn't find that and they didn't even allow it in the test center. So you need to remind yourself. There's no timer that's going to come up and say 5 minutes left or you're halfway through and you're so behind. That needs to be going on in your brain throughout. Number 2, tackle each section on its own. I got to DM and I felt like I absolutely flopped VR. So I felt really crushed. But in that 1 minute, I had a reset mechanism. Basically, the test center that I went to, I visited it before my UCAT. I called them. I told them, what keyboard are you going to use? What mouse are you going to use? I ordered the exact same thing. Where am I going to leave my water bottle? Is it going to be with me in the room or outside? A lot of them are computer centers, so they don't allow the water bottle inside so it doesn't spill on your computer. So I was like, that's actually a really good thing, because in that 1 minute, instead of sitting there and staring at the screen, I'm going to walk out, get a bit of water, because you're allowed to get your water bottle, and then walk back in, which means I'll refresh myself. And once I'm back on the screen, I don't care how I did in the last section. I've deleted it. I've moved on to the next section. Number 3, understand how timing works. Like I said, your brain should be your mental timer, doing this throughout. Use the UCAT official practice sets. They are your best friends. Honestly, a lot of banks are so wrong and so outdated. For example, in my real UCAT, I got a clock pattern. I used Medify when I did my UCAT. So I thought a clock pattern, because in Medify, it would say the shorthand is pointing at an odd number, or the longer hand of the clock is pointing at an even number. So I thought it had something to do with the numbers, and I sat there for 2 minutes and wasted my time. And it turns out UCAT official questions, the clock doesn't tell time. The clock is just a shape. It's either that the arrow of the clock is pointing in a specific direction, or that they're forming a specific angle between the two hands of the clock. So it turned out that although I was practicing in Medify was absolutely irrelevant in the real UCAT, and I wasted 2 minutes of my time, which is a lot in the UCAT, by the way, especially in such a time-strict section, finding a pattern that doesn't even exist. Number 5, carry out effective UCAT preparation. There's no point spending 10 hours doing ineffective UCAT preparation. How you find out what's effective is by asking people that have done it before. Spam your friends, use your networks, find anyone who's done it before. Feel free to contact me. I'm not sure if they've shared email or contact details, but I'm sure I can get them to share on the Instagram. I could help you with tips or techniques. And practice the exam in a library setting. What I mean by that, don't go somewhere absolutely quiet, because that's the mistake I did. I sat somewhere and there was one of those study rooms in the library and made sure no one interrupts me. And I went to the real UCAT, and there are people doing the driving exam. So they keep clicking on their mouse and clicking on their keyboards, and it agitated me because the practice that I did wasn't replicated in real life. And I felt really agitated by people like hitting on their mouse or hitting on their keyboard. So make sure that when you start studying a library that you replicate the exam setting, because the only thing that will feel familiar is what you've practiced before. So at least make something feel like home. How long does it take to prepare for the UCAT? Like I said, I get my students to start 6 weeks in advance at least. I've started with students 6 months before, a year before, 2 or 3 months before. But we recommend at MedicMind that you start 2 to 3 months before. And that means that you get as much practice out of it as possible, because at 2-3 months after that you start burning out. So we recommend starting 2-3 months, but starting paced, like really slow, and then building up. But now that it's July, almost July, August, September. If you do 2 to 3 months now, it should get you to mid-August, or to September. But we'll talk about when's the best date to do your UCAT later. Okay, so when should I start my UCAT preparation? I already told you enough about that. You've heard enough about that. So how to prepare for VR. So there's something called the keyword technique. It's a 4-step method, and we're going to do it in the question that we have next. We have a practice question, so I'll show you what that means. Identify extreme language. So when you see someone at school who's like the liar, you know they're a liar because they exaggerate so much. For example, they'll tell you, oh my God, I punched him up, I did all this amazing stuff, and it just feels like it's not real because they're exaggerating so much. The same thing with the UCAT. When you see something that's very exaggerated, something that's very extreme, like, for example, the UCAT is always a very difficult exam. I'm using always, I'm using very. These are two phrases that make my sentence a lot more exaggerated or a lot more powerful. Or if I tell you PlayStation 1 is no longer used in the UK, so no one ever in the whole of the UK uses a PlayStation. If one weirdo in all of the UK uses a PlayStation 1, my statement is no longer correct. That's why it's a lot harder for extreme language to be true, because it only takes one person to disprove them. If I told you PlayStation 1 is rarely used in the UK, it takes at least half of the population to disprove me. So whenever you see exaggerated language in VR, straight away think, red flag, red flag, red flag, they're trying to trip me up. All right, don't miss out true false answer questions, but also don't go looking for them. What I see a lot of students come to me when they start tutoring, they go, I saw a lot of banks online told me to skip to the easy questions and do them and then go back to the hard ones. You realize when you get a passage, like an essay or an abstract, and you'll get 4 questions with each of those passages. If I do one of those questions and then I skip and do this other completely different passage and then I come back to this passage, I'll have to reread this passage to understand it again, because a lot of the passages aren't straightforward. So never skip through passages if you can. I limited myself to 2 minutes per passage. So I knew if I spent more than 2 minutes this passage, I'll move on. I didn't like limiting myself to 28 seconds per question, because some questions for the passage will be really straightforward and some of them, like writer questions, will take a bit longer. So for me, I like to time myself per set around 2 minutes. And I had milestones. So if I was halfway through, I needed to be this much through the time. If I was 75% through, I'd check myself. I had these milestones in my head where I checked I was on time. If not, I'd skip to where I'm meant to be. And I'd never leave a question unanswered. Even if I wasn't sure, I'll pick a random answer, flag it, and move on. Look at the conclusion first for author questions. Whenever you get a writer question, look at the conclusion, because, like the last paragraph, it's most likely to be where the writer's opinion will be. You can guess some author questions because they tend to be time wasters. All right, what works best for all of you? Feel free to put it in a comment, send it in a comment. I'll tell you what works best for me. I like to read the question first, then the passage. A lot of people skim read the question. So for example, I read, a question in full, and then I skip to the passage and I start skim reading it. That's a good thing to do. But you never skim read the actual question, because the actual question tends to be twisted a lot. For example, they'll ask you which of the following is not a view of the author, or which of the following is not true. And a lot of people, when they skim read the question, they forget about the not, because they skim read it. So never skim read a question. You can skim read the article as much as you want, and we'll go through the best technique to do that, but never skim read a question. All right, try reading the passage in detail, then answer. Would you do that? Would you read the passage in detail? Don't read the whole passage in detail. Try skimming the text, then referring to the question. Would you do that? No. First thing we do is we read the first 2 lines of the passage. That's part of our 4-step keyword method. We read the first 2 lines of the passage, and the next thing we do is we read the question. We pick a keyword from the question, and then we go back to the text and we find where our keyword is. But again, I told you I'll show you that in an actual question right after the slide. So the 7th tip, look for keywords and dates. Yep, dates are actually keywords. Yep. So the 7th tip is watch out for strongest opinion questions. So some questions will say, which of the following is the strongest opinion of the author? Or which of the following would the author most likely agree with? They might agree with 4 of them, but one they agree with even more. And how I know that is because whenever I talk to someone about a specific point, or I have a specific debate with them, I always know what they agree with because of what they speak about the most. So when you look at a passage and you want to find out what the author agrees with the most, look at what they've mentioned the most, like they kept referring back to. Look at what they talk about in the most detail. Like if I'm really interested in something, I'll know a lot of facts about it, a lot of details about it. So look at what they mention the most, mention the most amount of detail, and what they say right at the end. Because if I really want to remind someone this is my main point, I'm going to say it right at the end as my finale statement. So what they say right at the end, what they say the most number of times, or what they mention the most amount of detail. That's the strongest opinion. Watch out for negative questions. Like I said, don't skim read the question, because when they ask you which of the following is not, or which of the following is not the opinion of the author, whenever they flip the question on its head and then making you look for something false, you'll skip that when you skim read. Don't spend too long checking. You don't have time to check. Practice in a library. We already talked about that. Work on screen. Like I said, I worked on a book, the Ultimate UCAT Guide book, but that was a bit of a mistake, because when I went onto Medify and I started using Medify, I realized how different it could be to click rather than do it on paper. And I also was using my phone calculator, and I was like, it's fine. What is it? An extra 2-3 seconds? That won't really matter. No one will care about the 2-3 seconds, but the 2-3 seconds build up in the UCAT, and everything sort of just builds up in the UCAT. So make sure you're using the original UCAT View Pearson calculator. And the best way to write on that calculator, I found, is to use the keyboard. Like I said, I ordered the exact keyboard that my test center would have. And like the PC keyboards, they have like a number pad on the right. Just make sure the num lock is turned off. I have a lot of students that come back and say, oh my god, I couldn't type, I was so stressed. You need to make sure the num lock is off, or the numbers aren't getting typed. So you can type directly into there, but we'll talk about tips for the UCAT calculator later. What band did I get in SJT? I got band 1, but I didn't use Medify for SJT because my sister did it before me, and she got a band 3 because she'd used Medify. So I didn't use Medify at all for SJT. I used Medentry. All right, don't fall for UCAT time traps. The UCAT will trap you with a lot of questions in terms of making you spend longer than you need to. Don't. All right, types of questions for writer questions. So a variety of writer questions can come up. According to the passage, the writer most probably agrees that. According to the passage, the writer believes that. According to the passage, the writer would like to change that. So basically, the most probably, I just told you how to approach that one, what they mention the most, in the most amount of detail, what they mention right at the end. The writer believes that, you check the conclusion first. It tends to have the writer's opinions. The writer would like to change, you look for the word change. But for me personally, I wouldn't look for the word change, just because I don't like looking for a keyword that has a lot of synonyms, because then it tends to mean that I'm looking and I don't find the word change, because they'll almost never give you a word that's exact same in the passage. They'll try and twist the word in a different way so you don't find the answer straight away. All right. Prepare yourself mentally. Talked about that. Work on skim reading. Talked about that. Use the flagging. Talked about that. Consider operational time. Operational time, I talked about that in terms of the calculator. All right. So let's try this question. I'm going to throw you in. You have 29 seconds. Let's go. Whenever you have an answer, put it in the comments. Someone said something about a book. Sorry, I didn't catch that. In terms of what book I'd recommend. If you could just type that again, please. All right, 10 seconds. Right. Before I talk about this question, I'm going to talk about the best books. So I used the Ultimate Guide to the UCAT book. It was good if you're starting early, as in it did not represent the UCAT at all. Because when I do questions on paper, they were nothing like doing them on the screen. It took a lot more time to type the questions in, to click next, until I learned the shortcuts. If you write Control-N, it should go to the next one. Control-P, it should go to the one before. Control-F, it will flag. I'm sure if any of you like copy-paste when you, on the screen, there's a difference between right-clicking or writing Control-C. It builds up in terms of time. If you write Control-N, it should move on to the next question. Anyway, in terms of the books I actually recommend, a lot of people will tell you not to use this book, the ISC UCAT book, because it's so old and it doesn't even have decision making. It has decision analysis. It like has a completely different, like old version of the UCAT. But I liked using it because it was so hard that when I went back to UCAT practice, the UCAT felt like heaven to me because of how hard the ISC book was. So I liked using it because the AR patterns on there and all the problems on there, like the QR dilemmas, the VR passages, were all a lot harder than the actual UCAT. So I get my students to do that book halfway through, and it freaks them out because they're like, oh my God, is this what the UCAT is going to be like? And then they go back to normal UCAT practice, and it feels a lot better. It feels like they're doing a lot better because the questions become easy and the UCAT becomes easy to them. So I found that there is a bit of psychological manipulation there. But that's what worked best for my students. And like I said, if you're going to start early, start with the ultimate guide to the UCAT book, but make sure you don't just use that because it's very different to using the screen. In terms of the Kaplan book, you asked if I would recommend that. Just for tips, to be honest. Like just read tips on there. Other than that, to be honest, no. YouTube videos will cover everything you need. Okay, so which of the following is not a view expressed by Mark Hall in a passage? Again, you could see here it says not a view expressed by Mark Hall. So we're looking for something that's not a view. Sorry, there you go, not a view. So first of all, this is a type 1 statement question. A lot of people make the mistake that they think all statement questions are the same, which is where you get a question and you get 4 statements. But there's type 1 and there's type 2. So type 1 is where you get a keyword in the passage. Here in the question. So here, Mark Hall is our keyword. And in type 2 questions, you don't get a keyword. It will say which of the following is true. So type 1 are very different to type 2. So when you're tallying yourself, make sure you rank them as different questions. So Mark Hall. So straight away, I look for a view expressed by Mark Hall. I can see that here there's a quote by him, and here there's a quote by him. So those are the only parts I'm going to read. But I never do it that way. So once I found that, a lot of people will go A and check A, B, check B, C, check C. But that's not how Medic Mind teaches it. Medic Mind says we go with the smartest option first. So plastic straws do not get recycled enough by pubs and bars. So since this is a negative statement, I tend to check it last. It's less likely to be true. The plastic bag tax is a successful example of a scheme which could also be used for plastic straws. To be honest, if it's a successful example, that tends to be a bit extreme because success is very subjective, so it doesn't seem like a viable option. In reality, no one needs a plastic straw for their beverage. Remember, we said extreme language is more likely to be false. And since we're looking for something false, the smartest option to check first is this. Because it has extreme language, it's more likely to be false. And we're looking for something that's false. So this is the first one I'm going to check. I'm going to look for something to do with straws. So it says, only kids need a straw with their fizzy pop. No one needs a plastic straw. Only kids need a straw. So this is the incorrect one. C is the correct option. So see how I didn't check A and B first because I was looking for something that would sound false. This one sounded mild. Plastic straws do not get recycled enough. It didn't say do not get recycled at all. It said do not get recycled enough. It sounded very mild. Successful example of a scheme which could also be used for plastic straws. Success was a bit subjective, so I don't want to look for it first. If I had to look for it at the end, sure. But it is a difficult word to look for, especially that success is subjective. The waste of plastic bottles is a smaller problem than the issue of plastic straws. Smaller, again. We're looking for something superlative. So with these kinds of things, I like to go with the smartest option first, so the one that's most likely to be true first, and then go for the rest. Which is why I checked C first, because if we're looking for reverse questions, so questions that flip and ask which is not a view, look for false, then we look for extreme language first, because remember, exaggerated people are more likely to be liars. All right. So someone asked a question earlier, what's the highest someone I've tutored has gotten? I can't disclose names or like specific scores, but I think the highest was 3,300 last year, so this last cycle. All right, How to prepare for decision making. With decision making, the technique is key. Make sure you understand how to use Venn diagrams of syllogisms. You can draw conclusions from paragraphs and different sets of data. Basically, ignore all that. Think. How does a puzzle become a puzzle? In decision making, every sentence on its own makes sense. Once they put the sentences together, that's how it becomes a puzzle. So with syllogisms, the best way to answer that puzzle is to draw those sentences into Venn diagrams so that you can see it in a better way. In terms of paragraphs and different data sets, you want to summarize the key points into a table, and we'll go through how you can do that, or into like some sort of diagram. We'll go through how you can do that with some examples. Learn what spatial equations are. We'll go through that. Try not to overflag. A lot of people get stuck in DM, so they're like flagging everything. Oh my god, I'm not sure of this puzzle. I'm not really sure of this answer. I tend to flag the ones that I'm just absolutely like, what? I'd guess, smart guess, like which one's most likely to be true. Flag and move on in case I don't have to cut time to come back at the end. Make sure you make note of your mistakes and revisit them because practice is key. Like I said, keep a tally and figure out where exactly in the puzzle did you go wrong. Where do you tend to go wrong? This is what spatial equation looks like. It's basically, like if you're in a WhatsApp group with your family and your dad or your uncle will send a picture and it says, if you are a genius, you can solve the following. Always do those because they're a lot like spatial equations. We won't do an example of a spatial equation because it's basically just simultaneous equations. But if you do want some tips around solving them, check out the Medic Mind YouTube. All right. I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer this question, and this is a decision-making visual logical puzzle. A visual logical puzzle is where you get some sort of visual diagram with your puzzle. There are about 10 different types of logical puzzles, but I'm not going to bother you with them now because this is just a quick overview. I will start the timer now. You should see on your Menti that you're allowed to comment. So if you just send a comment. Again, if you have any questions throughout, just put them in the comments as well. There will be a Q&A at the end, so don't stress too much if it's a bit of a longer question that's not relevant to what we're doing. Okay, voting is closed. You can still put your answers in the comments, but I'm going to start explaining it. Feel free to continue solving it if you're still answering. But this is why I like to time all my students to 1 minute, no matter how many marks the question is. Because with 5-part questions, if you get 5 out of the 5 parts correct, you get 2 marks. 4 out of the 5 parts correct, you get 1 mark. 3 out of the 5 correct, you get 0 marks. So it's honestly not worth it if you only have to mess up twice to get 0 marks. And the other thing is, it shouldn't take you more than 1 minute. If my students can do it in 1 minute, you can do it too. All right. So that's why I like timing them to less, the 2 mark questions, because then you could give yourself 1 minute and 20 seconds or something like that with these longer, harder ones. All right. Of the 4 girls in the class, 3 sit adjacent to each other in the back row. So we have 3 girls next to each other in the back row. Remember, you can't annotate on the screen. But see, the thing is, there is a way that you could annotate the screen. What I did is I called up the test centers and I checked what type of whiteboard they use. You know those really B-Tech whiteboards you get in high school sometimes where you get a paper inside a laminated like pocket, like those plastic pockets, and you get a paper inside? Yeah, I went to one of those broke test centers. So they told me you're going to get a paper inside a plastic pocket. And I was like, okay, so that's how I practice. I wanted, like I said, to represent everything. And I found myself stressed in one of the questions once. I pulled the paper out and I put the plastic sheet on the screen and I started annotating directly on the screen. So there is a way to annotate on the screen if you pull the paper out and put the plastic on the screen, but it depends what type of whiteboard you get. Otherwise, I'd stick to just writing on a whiteboard. But call up your test center and see what resources you have available, replicate them as much as possible in your practice. So we have 3 girls in the back. I don't know where, but I'm just going to put them here. The 4th girl, Cassidy, sits at the front left corner of the classroom, right? She sits in the front left corner. Oh, sorry, I wrote G instead of C. So normally with the UCAT, you see, Medic Mind's extra nice with their questions that they don't give you names that overlap, but they like using Jack, James, Jill. They all start with a J. So I always put the first letter and the last letter, like you saw Jack and James have JA. So I take the first letter and the last letter just so they don't overlap. Because I found myself in the real UCAT solving it, getting to the end and realizing I had the answer as J, but I didn't know which J it referred to, Jack or James. All right. So Cassidy sits in the front left corner of the classroom, and this is where I'd normally start. I like starting with a stated fact, which is a fact that's directly given to me. I don't like starting with something ominous, like, 3 girls at the back and I don't know where. I like starting with something that's like a solid fact. Cassidy sits as far as possible from Amy, all right? So Amy must sit there, AY. So I'm writing with my mouse. This must look really bad. Ian and Greg's in the front row, but not in the middle. Okay, Ian and Greg. I don't know which side, so either Ian or Greg. And here, either Ian or Greg. Mark and Jeremy sit as far as possible from each other. So Mark and Jeremy should be here, but I don't know which way around they are. And it's fine if you don't know which way around they are. And I know there are 3 girls here. So I know Amy is here, so another girl is here, and another girl is here. Since there are only 4 girls, and there's a boy there. I know gender neutral and all that exists now, but the UCAT doesn't believe in that. In the UCAT, the questions will either be male or female, girl or boy. So that's how I knew Amy sat next to 2 girls, and the 4th girl was Cassidy, and everyone else is a boy. So I'll just label it B. All right, Mark sits directly in front of Amy. Mark could be an E because we labeled him an E, or Mark could also be an F because we also labeled him an F. It's either Mark or Jeremy. So he could be in front of Amy, but he could also be behind Cassidy. So since I'm not sure, it says which is following must be true. I can't pick the first one. Greg sits next to Cassidy. Again, Greg could be here, but he could also be here because we don't know which way around Ian and Greg are. So that's still wrong. Mark does not sit beside any of the girls in the tutorial. If Mark was here, he's sitting next to a boy. If Mark was here, he's still sitting next to a boy. So this is the only one that must be true. Cassidy sits in front of Jeremy. She could sit in front of Jeremy, but she could also sit in front of Mark. If this doesn't make sense, just pop something in the comments and I'll go over it again. Otherwise, I'll just move on. All right, great. So QR, this is what the UCAT calculator looks like. It actually gives me PTSD just looking at that. Like I said, I ordered the exact keyboard and the mouse that would be used in the test, and I used my right hand to navigate the mouse. It might seem irrelevant now why I'm saying that, but it'll make sense in a second. And my left hand to type. So I'd have my mouse on these controls. And for example, let's say they gave me 360 minus 320 plus 340. So I'd type 360 and I'd have the minus here. So I could click on the minus and type in the number. But again, it depends on what keyboard you get because my number pad was on this side and my mouse was on this side. But make sure you order the exact same keyboard because it might be different. So a lot of people ignore this, M plus, M minus, MRC, which is where their downfall is. So M plus, M minus, MRC are memories. So for example, in the UCAT, they give you a lot of calculations like this, like bracket calculations. For example, 870 minus 360 plus 860 minus 950, for example. Basically, you'll have a lot of calculations that are in brackets or something like this, 7 times 9. Anyway, you could either do each of these calculations separately, put them into a whiteboard, and then come back and put them back into the calculator so that you can do what's outside the brackets. The best thing to do, though, is to use that memory function I was just talking about. So what you can do with this memory function is do this first calculation, 870 minus 360, and then click M+. M+ means it was just saved into your memory. Do the second calculation, and then add whatever was in your memory. So to recall something from memory, it's MRC, memory recall. M+, I'm saving something in my memory. And minus is deleting something from my memory. You know when like you get a code from Facebook or something like that and you go and tell your brother, hey, remember these numbers, 5, 6, 8, 9. That's what you're basically saying your calculator. M+ is remember these numbers. And minus is forget it, I don't need them anymore. And recall is, hey, what were those numbers I told you? So M+, saving into memory. M-, deleting from memory. MRC, recalling from memory. Practice your mental maths, because as much as you practice all these techniques on the calculator is so inefficient. It's so bad. It honestly like gave me anxiety using it, especially if I type one number wrong and then I have to delete and start everything from scratch. It was just horrible. So my mental maths became a lot faster in the UCAT, especially that I practiced a lot of QR, and my friend went into her exam. So with QR, it's a very dodgy section. My friend went into her UCAT exam and she came back and she told me, hey, Zainab, it was such an easy section. Like, don't worry, don't stress about it. It was all like mental maths. It was like mean, median, mode. So I was like, okay, I need to work on my mental maths with these easy calculations. And I didn't get that in my UCAT. All my questions were horrible table questions. And that's when I realized, I looked it up, the UCAT is a reservoir. There are over 100,000 questions and you're going to get a random combination of them. If your mom prayed for you that morning, you might get the easy ones. If she didn't, you might get the harder ones. So practice on a computer. Like I said, paper is not the same. And make sure you go over interest rates and tax questions. And remember to read the question first, because there is a lot of information. Just like with VR, like we said in verbal reasoning, never skim read the question, but you can skim read the passage. The same thing with QR. You can skim read the numbers and the data they give you, but never skim read the question that they're trying to get you to answer. Right, how do I go off this? There we go. So let's try this question. You have 40 seconds. I'm going to try and slightly zoom in just so you can see this better. 40 seconds. Even on the Menti, you can zoom in on the like question and read it better. But that's the 40 seconds. Okay, so let's go through this. Sorry if you didn't get it done, but like I said, this is just an overview. You'll have lots of opportunities before your UCAT to hopefully ace this. The first thing I like to do is read the question. For which book was the... Actually, I like to read the titles for the table first, but I'm assuming you already did that because it's basic common sense. And then I read, for which book was the difference in average number of words? Oh God, okay, it's already sounding complicated. So I try and break it down. I have books, and these books exist in Russian or in English. And I'm not sure if you guys have these kinds of books, but you know the book that you only read a bit of and then you completely forget about the book? That's what percentage completion is. How much percentage of the book on average did people complete across both languages, across all the readers? So what I can do is find the percentage of this, then find the percentage of this. So basically find 12% of this and 12% of this and take them away from each other, because it's asking for the average number of words completed, the difference in them. So I can find the average number of words completed in Russian, average numbers of words completed in English, and then take them away from each other, but that would take forever. So whenever I'm finding percentages and then taking a difference, I always take the difference first and then find the percentage. So I'll do 75 take away 68, which is 7,000. I'm going to skip crime and punishment because it's not even one of the options in the question. That's called elimination. Fathers and sons, 70 take away 66 is 4. So 4,000 difference. And here I'm just going to put a title. I'm putting the difference in thousands just so I don't forget that I'm working in thousands. A lot of people here say, why don't I write 7,000 or write 4,000 or write everything in full? Writing 3 zeros in the UCAT takes a second. A second is a lot of time in the UCAT. I don't know if you've realized yet, but it will hit you soon that you don't have that much time. All right. The next one, the difference is 8,000. I'm going to skip Lolita. It's not one of my options. I'm going to skip the Gulag. It's not one of my options. And what's on the Margarita? It's already too big. I don't care about it. I'm looking for the smallest. Yeah, and that's too big. So I'm going to focus on these 3. I look at Life of Avacum, and it has a bigger difference and a bigger percentage than the rest, so it can't beat them because I'm looking for the smallest difference. Smallest difference in average completion. So I'm looking for the smallest difference and the smallest percentage in average completion. But then I look at these. When I compare them, this one has a smaller difference and this one has a smaller percentage. So just by inspection, so just by looking at them, I don't know which one's smaller. So I have to calculate them both. I'll find 12% of 7,000 and I'll find 21.9% of 4,000. And once I calculate both, I'll realize that a hero of our time is less by 40, I think, when you calculate them. So I find 12% of 7,000 and 22% of 4,000. You saw me use several techniques there. First of all, elimination, eliminating what just was too big and didn't seem right, and eliminating the ones that aren't even one of my options. It's not possible for them to be true. You also saw me use shortcuts like thousands and use inspection, where I saw that Life of Avacum had a larger average percentage and a larger difference, so I eliminated it. And you also saw me skim read the passage and then fully read the question and break it down to understand it better. So those are some of the key techniques we use to answer these kinds of questions. And you saw me also estimate because I didn't write the difference in full. I wrote it as an estimate, and even when I calculated 12% of 7,000, I didn't do 11.9% of the exact difference. I estimated. And you can use estimation in certain circumstances. The way I know if it's okay to estimate is if the numbers seem very far apart, and if the answer options were numbers, I'd look at numbers that are very far apart, and I'd look at triggers like estimate or work exactly or what is the exact difference or something like that. And with multi-step calculations, I'm very wary of estimating. So calculations have multiple steps. I don't like estimating too early because then the estimation becomes bigger. All right, if you have any questions about QR, we can cover them later. But for now, let's move on to AR, or you could leave them in the comments down below. So use abstract reasoning pattern tables. I'll talk about that a bit more, but I slightly disagree with that, and I'll tell you why later. I use something called triggers, but we'll talk about that when we talk through pattern types. Memorize the key triggers, and that's what I get most of my students to focus on. Choose appropriate resources. We talked about the good resources, how not to use Medify because their question bank is wrong. Be vigilant with your timing, so be very careful with all the timing that you use. Know when to move on in the exam. Have that mental timer that I was talking about. And don't spend too much time on time waster questions. We'll talk about them later. And always start with the simplest boxes. So a lot of people, when they first come to me to start tutoring, they look at set A altogether and they go, I can't find anything in common between all of them. Well, if I put you and everyone in your school in the same room and I tell you have 10 seconds to find a similarity between you, it's going to take you forever. But if I set you into pairs and I tell you you have 10 seconds to find a similarity, it's a lot easier because you're not focusing on finding a similarity between everything. You're just focusing on the 2 simplest boxes or 2 simplest people. So whenever you get a whole set, don't focus on the whole set and try and find similarity between everything. Take 2 simplest boxes, look at what's similar, and then expand further. All right, so number patterns. Let's have a go at this one. So with these types of questions, this is called a type 1 question in abstract reasoning. You get 40 seconds to find the pattern and 20 seconds to answer all 5 test boxes. So in total, you have 1 minute. These are type 1 questions, and these are the most abundant type of questions that come up in abstract reasoning. There are type 2, type 3, and type 4, but all we need to focus on for now is type 1, since this is just an overview. You have 40 seconds to find the pattern and 20 seconds to find test all 4 test boxes. Ten seconds left. Okie dokie. Let's get started. So like I said, we'll focus on the 2 simplest boxes. So what I like to do is just, what here seems like the simplest box? This seems like a simple box. This seems like a simple box. This one only has triangles and squares. So I only want to focus on triangles and squares here. Or could it do something with color? So there's black and 2 white. 2 black and 4 white. It doesn't seem like to do anything with color. So I'm going to forget about color. I'm going to focus on shape. Triangle. There's 1 triangle and 2 squares. So 1 triangle, 2 squares. Here I can see 2 triangles and 4 squares. It seems like a ratio, a 1-to-2 ratio. So for every triangle, we have 2 squares. So when we have 2 triangles, we have 4 squares. It seems like a pattern that's working. Let's check it on the rest. 1 triangle, 1 square. 2 triangles, 4 squares. 2 triangles, 4 squares. 1 triangle, 2 squares. It seems like it's working on the whole set. So I can apply it as a pattern. The other thing I can see is that all of these triangles are either equilateral or isosceles. They are not right angled. It might be relevant later, but whenever you see a triangle, always keep an eye out on what type of triangle it is, because they like twisting it in the UCAT. For example, the pattern will only apply if it's a right angle or if it's an isosceles. It's not relevant in this set, but it might be relevant in others. So I'm just pointing it out. The other thing the UCAT likes to do is use triangles as arrows, because remember, triangles are just arrows without the actual hand. So triangles tend to refer to orientation patterns, and they tend to point in specific directions. All right, so let's get back to this. We saw that there's a 1-to-2 ratio between triangles and squares here, so there's double the number of squares as triangles, and whenever you're looking at set B, you're going to look for something inverse. So again, I'm going to take the 2 simplest boxes, and I'm going to look for something similar. I can see that there's double the number of squares as circles. Double the squares as circles. Double the squares as circles. Yep, it still applies. Double the squares as circles. So looking at this first box, I can see a square, a circle, and a triangle. It can fit into both boxes. It can't fit into any box, actually, because it's not double the squares as circles or triangles. Unless you want to count that as a square, but it seems like a diamond. So it doesn't seem right, since all the other squares in the sets are straight. So whenever you look at it and you're like, actually, doesn't that count? Always look at your sets. You have the pattern right there. Check, are there any of these squares are tilted? No. So this can't be true. So C. C refers to both and neither. All right, so here I have double the squares as circles. So that's set B. Same here, set B, double the squares as circles. And here, double the squares as triangles. That's set A. Here, neither, because there's 1 square and 1 triangle. So C. All right, let's move on. So these are the types of patterns I was talking about earlier. And what I was talking about is that you should try and keep a trigger list more than a pattern list. Yes, you should still keep a pattern list. So what I did when I first started, I kept track of all the patterns. I was like, yes, I'm going to memorize all the patterns that are ever going to come up. The UCAT can't trick me. Then I realized there are so many possible patterns. And instead, I started looking for triggers. For example, whenever I saw an arrow, it tended to do something with orientation patterns. Or whenever I saw really complex shapes like stars and pluses that all tended to like repeat again and again, it tended to have something to do with the number of sides. Or whenever I saw a shape on its own inside a box, it tended to do with odd versus even. Or whenever I saw a lot of curved shapes like the crescent moon or the stop sign, because remember, there's only a certain number of curved shapes they can make. Whenever I see all these weird curved shapes, I think curved versus straight. Whenever I see really weirdly stretched out shapes, I think position, since they're trying to fit them within a certain side of the box. Or whenever I see weirdly stretched out shapes, I also think size, because maybe they want the bigger shape to be on one side. There are lots of different things that you can go through and lots of prepared pattern lists or trigger lists, but keep track of all the patterns, but also all the methods that led you to the patterns. For example, I saw one shape on its own. I thought odd versus even. It was true. So I tally up how many of my triggers work. And if it works more than 10 times, it's a valid trigger. And that's how I got to that trigger list. Okay. How to prepare for SJT. With situational judgment, I like using the GMC. So the General Medical Council has two guides. GMP, which is good medical practice, which is for doctors. But the more important one is Tomorrow's Doctors, which is a lot longer, but it's targeted at medical students because they tend to be a lot more stupid. In terms of the point, sorry, I don't mean stupid as in a rude way, but they tend to mess around a lot more. For example, someone was pulled up at my university for taking a TikTok on the ward because patient files were showing on the background. Someone posted a picture of the ECG. Oh my God, I'm so excited. This is my first ECG, and the patient information was on there. Someone went out drunk and said some very ludicrous comments about COVID, and they were pulled up by the university. Basically, at the teenage age, people tend to be slightly more reckless. Anyway, Tomorrow's Doctors is the guide for medical students. And the other thing that you need to consider with medical students as well is that they have very different things that they are allowed to do. For example, they're not allowed to prescribe. They always have to say that we're a medical student. The GMC is very, very strict with how medical students are allowed to act because of a lot of insubordinate behavior that happened in the past. And the other thing that you need to consider with SJT is a band 4 will disqualify you from most universities. A band 3 will reduce points in some universities. A band 2 means, good enough. Band 1 means you might get extra points in some universities. And the other thing with SJT is last year, a lot of the scenarios that came up for my students were non-medical. So be very wary of focusing only on medical scenarios because a lot of them were like, you ran over your neighbor's cat, tell them about it. Well, that's an interview question, but I mean, they'll have things like mundane day-to-day things like your friend cheated on an exam. This is the response. How appropriate is it? So don't focus just on clinical scenarios. Focus on the key ethics that you take from it. For example, the 4 key pillars of ethics are non-maleficence, which is do no harm, beneficence, which is do good, justice, which is basically treat everyone equally. And those are the 4 pillars of medical ethics. And when you're working through those pillars, what you want to consider is, are those the best options? For example, do no harm. If my friend cheats, what harm is it causing for my class? Or do no harm in a patient scenario. If one of the consultants arrives drunk, do I tell them off? Is that doing harm? Or is it going to do more harm if I don't tell them off and they treat someone while they're drunk? So always weigh up the good you do against the bad that will happen, basically, which is where non-maleficence and beneficence kind of weigh up against each other. And the other two pillars, autonomy and justice, don't weigh up against each other that much. But autonomy basically means that you have power. Every patient has power over their own body, and it's the first pillar. Arguably, some say the most important pillar. And autonomy means that every person needs to be respected as an entity, as person who has power over their own body. Like if you own a car, it's completely yours. Same thing, when you own your body, it's completely yours. That's autonomy, making free will decisions. And justice is, so in terms of the NHS, justice is utilitarian. So whatever benefits the majority is what they go for. But justice in ethical terms is basically treating everyone fairly. Not equally, fairly. All right. So this is a kind of question that would come up, and it's called an appropriateness question. You get a question and you answer very appropriate thing to do, appropriate but not ideal, inappropriate but not awful, or very inappropriate thing to do. Whenever you think of picking a very inappropriate thing to do, it has to have zero good in it. So, there is nothing good in this response that they've done. So something happens, someone's done this, how appropriate is this response? Not how appropriate is this scenario, how appropriate is this response? And a lot of times we get scenarios where, for example, someone's made a mistake and they apologized. So my students go, that's not a very appropriate thing to do. They never fixed the mistake. But what you don't realize is you have to judge that response independently of anything else. So yes, they apologized, but no one told you that's the only thing they did. And that's a mistake a lot of people do, is that they assume that's the only response that happens. The other thing a lot of students do as a mistake is that they go to, for example, they go to question 1, they pick a very appropriate thing to do. They go to question 2, they're like, oh, that's a very appropriate thing to do. They go to the one before and they demote it. Just because something is very appropriate doesn't mean something else can't be very appropriate. If we go back to that scenario where one of my friends made a mistake, reporting the mistake, that's a very appropriate thing to do. Apologizing to a patient, that's a very appropriate thing to do. Reassuring the patient of their safety, that's a very appropriate thing to do. Documenting the mistake, that's a very appropriate thing to do. Not just one thing is very appropriate. All right, so let's go back to this question. They asked the consultant doctor if they can spend spare time they have to help other junior doctors. Whenever working together for pets care, so it's A. All right, so whenever I think about hospital settings, when I was a student, like when I was applying, I had no idea what a consultant was like, or what a registrar was, or what a doctor was. So for me, I didn't like to imagine a hospital setting. I like to imagine school, something I was familiar with. You can imagine the consultant like the head teacher, the registrar like the assistant head, anyone more senior than you, like a surgical trainee or a core trainee, they'll probably be your teachers, and junior doctors, you and your colleagues, you and your students, you and your other students at school. So here, a junior doctor on an acute surgery ward completes their work efficiently within the hours they are contracted to work. As in, I finished all my maths work early when I was in class. Okay, I have a lot of spare time, and I don't find the maths work very challenging. I go up to the teacher and I ask her if I can help other people. I don't find anything wrong with that. It's a very appropriate thing to do because they finished early. They're basically being an absolute angel and saying, can I help others? A lot of people here say, but they didn't ask for harder work. There's the part about, the work not being challenging enough. A very appropriate thing to do does not have to address every single issue. As long as it addresses at least one key issue, it doesn't have to solve every problem in the scenario, which is why that's A. All right, this is the next one. Again, I'll give you 23 seconds. Do we get partial marks in SJT? Are they counted towards deciding the mark? So someone asked about partial marks. And if you're in the right half, you do get partial marks. Basically, if the answer is very important and you pick important, you'll get half a mark. And if the answer is not important at all, and if you pick of minor importance, you get half a mark. It doesn't work across halves. For example, if the answer was important and you picked of minor importance, you don't get half a mark. You have to be in the correct half. Right, someone just put B. And does it contribute to your mark? Well, there's something called an SJT UCAT marking table. So if you're ever wondering kind of, how many marks do I need to get a specific mark, you have to get 57 out of 69 to get band 1. So your half mark and your half mark will add up. If you got 56.5, you're still below the mark. So it can add up if you get enough marks to hit the band. All right. This is called an importance question. So you're trying to make a decision, and these are different contributors. For example, when I'm trying to decide whether I should wear a black blazer or a blue blazer, I'll ask my sister, what do you think? Should I consider the color of the blazer? Should I consider the size of the blazer? Should I consider how nice I look in the blazer? So these are different factors that would influence my decision. And that's the scenario. This is a factor. How important is this factor for me to decide? For example, a junior doctor in A&E is struggling with his workload. He's extremely tired. How important is it to consider that they might make a mistake? Someone could die. That's very important. Whenever patient safety is involved, always pick very important. Patient safety is your first priority. If there's one takeaway you take from this SJT section, patient safety is your first priority. Whenever patient safety is involved, very important. Right. Before I move on to that, I just wanted to touch on one thing. There is one more type of question that was introduced lately, about 3 or 4 years ago, which is called an appropriateness rank. So you'll get something like this, except you'll get 3 of these statements on the same screen, and they'll tell you to rank them from most appropriate to least appropriate response. What I like to do is take each statement independently. So take the first statement and rank it in my head. Is it A? Is it C? Take the second statement. Seems like a B. Third one seems like a D. So I rank them independently, and then I compare them and see which one was most appropriate. So approach them just like you would approach one of these. Split them up as if they were 3 different questions, and then rank them against each other. Right. That's the appropriateness rank. I think Asher wanted to jump in here, so you're live, Asher, if you just unmute yourself.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. While Asher sorts that out, just take a picture of this QR code, and that should get you to join the WhatsApp group for any future webinars. And in this WhatsApp group, they'll share links of like VR crash course, DM crash course, UR crash course, hard keyword table questions. So all these random webinars, they're completely free. Just join it, you have nothing to lose, and you'll be able to join all these different webinars. Are you able to join us, Asher?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Amazing. Yep. So there's some free resources as well, and we constantly add these in. We'll also be sending everyone an email after this session, maybe a couple of days after, with a free UCAT course that will include all of sort of a few tutorials across all of the sections on the UCAT, the BMAT, and interviews, and a bit of a strategic application guidance. And that's something you guys can access through our website. So if you have any sort of queries, etc., you can also ask on that course as well. It's sort of a mini guide for you to get started with. And you should receive an email from us. It sometimes goes to your junk folder, so make sure you keep a look on that as well. And you have to register on our site once you receive that email. That's something we'll send over to you within the next few days. I just wanted to share a link over here for our Trustpilot, if that's okay, because we put a lot of work into creating these events and also making sure that you get the appropriate help you need with all of the presentations that we do. And it's just basically just a quick 2-minute review, if you guys can leave it for us. It's just to see how we did, and we appreciate any feedback really. And Zainab's done a lot of work today to sort of explain the UCAT thoroughly to you guys. So if you guys can please leave some feedback there. Can you see my screen?
We can't see your screen because it's my screen is live. I think they have to change it from the background, like
Okay.
the background settings.
It's fine. Can somebody make my screen live if that's okay? That's perfect. So if you guys can leave us a review, that'd be great. So you can just scan this QR code. I'll just give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. Just whilst we're at it, I think somebody asks how much our tuition costs. You can visit our website and ask, because we normally have different packages depending on what tuition a student needs. But if you just mention that you're from SAMDA and that you've attended the live course, we can get a lesson set up for you quite quickly. We do have some schemes that are sort of more suited for students who have, for example, from widening participation background. And we do provide an online course for free. If you just let us know, we can get, with the appropriate evidence, we can get that going for you. And another thing which you guys might find better than the one-to-one tutoring, if you wanted a very quick overlook of the UCAT, this covers all of the different sections, and it covers quite a bit of practice, and it comes with the self-study materials for free. You can use this. So you can just scan this QR code, visit our website, and we run this course every Sunday, and it's held by our top tutors. For example, Zainab does quite a few of these, and you will get sort of opportunities to get personalized feedback, and you'll get to speak to the tutor as well as colleagues who will also be there on the day. This is all being uploaded to YouTube. So if, for example, you need this QR code again, you can just visit the SAMDA YouTube channel and access it from there.
Also, just to reiterate what Asha said in terms of this day, honestly, it's worth it. Like, it goes through all the key stuff in terms of like VR, DM, QR, AR. I'm not getting money out of saying this, by the way. I don't get paid by how many students attend, but it honestly helped so much. Like, if I did this before I did my actual QR, it would have helped so much in terms of the overviews, because it just covers the key things you need to know instead of wasting time on the things you don't need to know. And we'll be going through the Q&A now, so just hold with us if there's anything else you wanted to add, Asher.
No, so that's absolutely fine. I'll contribute in the Q&A where I can, but we can get started with that if that's okay.
Someone asked me to go back on the WhatsApp QR codes. I've shared that on the Menti. If you're on the Menti, you could see it. And if you could just make my screen live, that would be great. Whoever's in charge of screen sharing. Thank you. Okay, so this is the WhatsApp group. So just take a picture of it, and it should also be on the Menti. All right. It's really important that if you have any questions, join that Menti on top, because I'll be able to answer any questions you have in the Q&A. I don't mind staying back as much as you need me, so use the time you have now. How much do you charge for tutoring? I think Asher talks through that. I honestly don't know how much they charge, so I can't answer that. Our partial marks counting and deciding the band. Well, I talked through the marks you get. So if you get half marks, yes, they will be counted towards it, because you need 57 marks to get a band 1. So you can get 2 half marks from 56, and that will push you up to 57. They are counted to your marks, basically, yes. Next question, is there partial marks for decision making? It's not partial marks, unfortunately, but I can show you what these kinds of questions look like. So in the UCAT, you'll get, I'm just going to specify UCAT because they tend to be in a lot of different things. So in the UCAT, you tend to get these kinds of questions which have 5 parts. They don't have to be syllogisms. They could be interpreting information questions. Point is, they come like this. If you get 5 out of 5 correct, you'll get 2 marks. If you get 4 out of 5 correct, you'll get 1 mark. And if you get 3 out of 5 correct, you'll get 0 marks. So you don't get partial marks. They're considered partial because you only get parts of the marks available, but you don't get half marks, no. Is there any way I could apply specifically for you to be my tutor? Yes, because when you apply to MedicMind, you'll be given the options of different tutors. For example, you'll get 10 different tutors or 20 different tutors. It depends on how many are available at the time. And you could ask for me specifically. And the other thing that you can do is ask for a tutor from your specific university. For example, if you want to apply to Queen Mary's and you're really keen on Queen Mary's, they could find you a specific Queen Mary's tutor. Or you're really keen on someone who's really good at DM because you're really bad at DM, they could find you a DM specific tutor. What happens if it takes you longer to read the questions and text? So when I did the UCAT, I had been in this country for 2 years. My English was ridiculously bad. But there is something that I like to use to improve my reading. It's an app for those that have the iPhone. I'm going to share the name of the app on here. But the other thing that I also liked to do was to improve my reading. Like I said, I focused on technique before I focused on time. And like the practice questions I did with you, I didn't really have to read that much to be able to get to my answer. I'm naturally a slowly reader. So for me, I wanted to cut down in terms of what I had to read. So I made some smart choices about what I wanted to check first, where I would check first. And that minimized my reading. So it's called Word of the Day, the app. And if any of you don't have the app, there is a Chrome extension called Swift Read Faster. So if you don't have iOS, as in if you don't have an iPhone, you can't download Word of the Day. Download Swift Read. It's a Chrome extension. Install it. It will help you get your reading faster. And I also liked using a reading speed test, and I would test my speed every week to make sure that I'm increasing my speed. I just liked, having some key markers that I'm doing okay or getting better. So again, Swift Read is the Chrome extension, and the app to improve your vocabulary is a word a day. Word of the day. And vocabulary is very important in verbal reasoning because they won't give you definitions. So there are certain words that you just need to know the meaning of. For example, attorneys and lawyers are the same thing. So just some words that would be useful to know. We get laminated noteboard or whiteboard at test center. That's what I was trying to say. Every test center is different. I went to a very broke test center that couldn't really afford whiteboards, which is why I got the laminated paper where I didn't get a laminated paper. I got a paper inside a plastic wallet because you can't unwrap laminated paper. But if it's a paper inside a plastic wallet, you can take the paper out, put the plastic wallet on the screen, and annotate the plastic wallet, which is how you can annotate the screen. That's what I did. But if not, you'll have to stick to the whiteboard. So what I did is I called 2 or 3 test centers that were close to me that had test dates available. And I said, what would you provide me? What kind of keyboard do you have? What kind of mouse do you have? Do you have a touch screen? I was completely against touch screen. I didn't want a touch screen because I knew that the calculator already made me angry and agitated. A touch screen would be even worse because, getting through the numbers and typing the exact things I need, it just wasn't for me. So I called up the test centers, made sure they had the facilities I wanted, and that's how I chose my test center. But a lot of you, if you're not in London, you won't have those same options. You might have to travel far. I have some of my students that travel the day before, stay in London, and then test the next day just because they want the perfect test center. But you can work with whatever you're given as long as you know what you have beforehand and practice to what you're going to be given. Where on the website do I apply for tutoring? Is there a link? Asher, could you help with that?
Hey guys, so to apply for the tutoring, you can visit medicmind.co.uk, or alternatively, is there a way I can share a link here just for the website? You can leave your number and your email address, and what we normally do is we just contact you within 24 hours with the information on the tutoring. So you normally receive that information over WhatsApp. If you wanted to go for that exclusive live UCAT classroom day, just let us know. I've already given you the QR code. We can just resend that to you over there. Is there a way I can share this to a chat somehow?
Yeah, sorry, because of safeguarding reasons, we have to disable the chat.
Okay, that's fine. I think the best thing the students can do is just visit medicmind.co.uk, and you should be able to find anything you want on the tutoring or any resources that we have through there. I think Zainab actually shared the free resources we have, so it's on the same website really. If you just visit that, you can see on there.
So someone asked which websites are best for resources. So what I like to use for, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Zainab. Just before you talk about that, I think one of the best things you guys can do for resources is stick to computer resources. So anything online is best, because at the end of the day, you'll do your UCAT on a computer in one of the test centers, similar to where you do your theory test for driving. And if you use books or written resources, that's fine, but you also want to practice using a keyboard and mouse. I think Zainab will give you some more specific websites that she recommends. But like I said, we've got lots of free practice questions as well you guys can use, and there's quite a few other websites as well that you can utilize.
So like Asher said, we shared some free resources earlier. I could just flip back one slide. But I like using, I told you the books I liked using, but like Asher said, and like I said earlier, I liked using the screen more because it was very different when I did it on the book. There is the UCAT official website, and there's nothing better than that. MedEntry released a new question bank last year, and it was really good in terms of SJT and quantitative reasoning. But for verbal reasoning, I found that the best website was Past Medicine. So like I said, for different sections, there are different reliability for different banks. So for verbal reasoning, I liked Past Medicine. For decision making, I liked using, what did I use for decision making? I think I used Medify, but it wasn't good because I ended up using the book instead. And it was one of the sections I struggled getting a good question bank for. And then quantitative reasoning, I used Medify, but it was really bad. Like I said, my students last year used MedEntry alongside their tutoring, and they loved it because it complemented all the techniques I taught them. And then abstract reasoning, I like using Past Medicine or MedEntry. Same with SJT. Past Medicine and MedEntry, to be honest, were the best banks if you don't have MedicMind. MedicMind does have really good banks in terms of mocks, because I ran out of mocks at the point that I was like a week away from my exams. So it's good because they have like 12, 13 different mocks that you could do. They have question banks specific to like question types. For example, we did a question type today, type 1 statement questions. They'll have a whole question bank around that specific type. So if at the time, like I said, I kept a tally of the question types I got wrong, if I had those specific question banks, I could always just refer back to the question type that I struggled with, instead of going through banks and practicing so many different questions just to get this to the types I needed. So I guess that's good about the MedicMind banks as well. Well, like I said, I liked using a variety. I didn't like sticking to just one bank. Because I needed to finish as much as possible in 2 weeks, and I crammed myself. But I would not recommend that. Spread it over 6 weeks or 2 to 3 months, and try and space out your resources. See what resources you have available and try to spread them out, because you don't want to run out of resources by the end. And if you do get MedicMind, MedEntry, don't get Medify. I do not recommend it. Most of my students that used Medify last year struggled in the real UCAT. And Past Medicine. Those were the best like banks that I used. Right. I'm gonna give it 2 minutes for any more questions. If not, I think SAMDA will jump in here to wrap up. To submit any of your questions, just go to Menti, put the code on the top, and you can put in any questions that you have. It doesn't have to be relevant to UCAT applications. It could be interviews, personal statements, BMAT, any of it. Also, I think someone asked how they could contact me. I'm not sure with the safeguarding, but SAMDA, if you could, I could send you my Instagram and you could share it on your Instagram so that anyone that had any questions further, they could contact me on there. But I'm not sure with safeguarding if I have to share my email. Maybe they could CC their teachers.
Yeah, if you share, that would be better if you share your email and then they can CC and SAMDA. Yeah, that would be better.
So I'll put my email on the screen. This is my personal email. So if you have any queries, this should come to me directly. I check it every day. And it's Zainab elshabar1@outlook.com. Just double check the spelling. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Are you happy for us to finish off?
There's just one more question. Would you recommend UCAT Ninja? So I might be slightly biased because last year what I did is I joined the WhatsApp group chats for all the different companies. Do you have any resources for personal statement? I'll talk about that in a second. I joined the WhatsApp group chat for all different companies because I wanted to make sure that I got the best resources for my students. So I used the UCAT Ninja in the study plan that I initially started making for my students, because what I do is I help them make their study plan and personalize it to them. And I put UCAT Ninja in some of those because I was like, it has some free resources, you can get to use it. And initially when I tried it out, there were 100 questions a day for free. And then halfway through UCAT season, they doubled their price and only allowed 30 questions a day for free, which meant all my students were left either pay or they can't do practice. So I personally have a bias against them because they doubled their prices halfway through UCAT season and cut down the questions they had available for free. So I don't like people who abuse money like that in the middle of UCAT season just because they knew people needed it. And it didn't have that much of good practice anyway. It was fun, to be honest, with the whole Ninja Dojo thing, but that's just a marketing label thing. I don't care as about the label as much as I cared about the content. So like I said, Past Medicine was a lot better, and I found it after they kind of doubled their price. I went looking for better resources. Past Medicine was a lot better, and it's free for 6 months. You don't need it more than 6 months. Can you go back to your email? Yeah, I'll go back to my email while I answer the other question, which is, do I have any good resources for personal statement? So the best thing I found for personal statement, I found it worth it to get a tutor. For me, I was widening participation as part of a program called Oxbridge something. I can't remember the name, but they gave me a tutor for 2 hours. And in 1 hour, they fixed my personal statement. It was ridiculously bad. After I saw the new version, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I found the old version to be good. So I'd say just pay for an hour of tutoring or 2 hours. Honestly, it's worth it. Even if it's like £70 or like £80, it is so worth it, because after I thought I had the perfect personal statement. My chemistry teacher read it. She said, this is perfect. My physics teacher read it, said, this is perfect. My tutor saw it and said, this is absolutely ridiculous. You'll never get into medical school with this. And honestly, if I didn't pay for those 2 hours, I don't know if I would have gone into any of my medical schools, because I read over it now and I cringe over the first draft. So I'd say get tutoring. Pay for PA tutoring on MedicMind website. Sorry, I didn't understand that last comment that someone sent. Can you... I can't find it here. Whoever sent that comment, would you mind sending it again? Pay for PA tutoring.
I think what they mean is physician associate tutoring. If that's right. In terms of the physician associate course, they don't have UCAT. I don't believe that. It's normally each university will probably have an interview or look at your personal statement there. We have helped students in the past for physician associates. The thing is, it's very similar, the interview, to medicine. It's a graduate course, so normally people do an undergraduate in biomedical sciences, for example. The the only thing I'd advise there is if you're looking for UCAT tutoring, that's fine. Lots of people do that at the moment with physician associate. There is lots of ways that you can prepare for the interview by yourself as well. If you need a bit of help, we do mock interviews, etc. as well. That's totally fine. As for just the resources, make sure you use a variety of them as well. It's totally fine to just use past medicine, but I think personally there are some inconsistencies on past medicine as well. So try to use a variety so that you use 2 different types of questions and different difficulties. As Zainab recommended, it's totally fine to also use a book for certain types of questions as well. I think another question's come up, Zainab, 10th one.
They also asked about PS tutoring. So I think what they meant is personal statement tutoring available on the MedicMind website.
I think we do 2 things. So you can either get some tutoring for personal statements. The other thing you can do is you can submit your personal statement for a review and you normally get some written feedback. So there's 2 options and you can do either. It's really up to you. If you're more of an independent writer and prefers to write it yourself and then get some feedback to improve, then there's an option for that. The other type of student who's very sort of confused of where to start, what to write, you can do you can get a lesson to start with a tutor. There is a website that I'm just trying to remember. There are some sample personal statements from medical students in the past, so they upload it there. But just to be sort of just give you kind of caution here, don't try to copy any of it. This is a plagiarism warning. It's best to sort of use those as a guideline. Every personal statement has their own sort of, let's say, star factor in it. Not every single university will assess personal statements differently. Not all of them require personal statements or a really good personal statement in order for you to get a offer for an interview. I think only 3 or 4 universities now, for example, King's College, will actually use it in their selections process. The other universities use it as a way to screen for any red flags and to look for mitigating circumstances, or they don't score it at all unless you were very similar to another candidate. So in recent years, personal statements aren't as important. But however, if you wanted some help and you felt like yours wasn't on really good, then you can just contact us via our website and we can help arrange a quick session with somebody. Personal statements tend not to take too long, and I'd recommend you guys to get help from school where possible. Proof check it with any friends that you have that are really good with English language or literature. And also make sure to ask anybody. For example, your local GP can also help with this as well. When I was sort of going through writing personal statements, I did mine about 10 to 15 times, and I checked through various people and got lots of feedback and then collated the best feedback I had and made my personal statement from there.
Someone asked Medify or MedEntry, but I'll get back to that in a second. In terms of personal statement, like Asher said, there are all those things available, but I don't advise the written feedback as much. I got one of those free written feedbacks from Medify, or I think they did it for £10 for like a bit. And I felt like they just copy-pasted and edited some stuff. I'm not saying Medify will do the same thing. I've done written feedback and I did it really well. But I just felt like if I had someone there to discuss the feedback with, to like talk through it, I felt like a lot better. Even if you're an independent writer, I'd say really go for the tutoring, because even my independent writer students, I get them to write it on call, or I get them to write it off call and then come back to me for 15 minutes and then go off call. So it's a lot more worth your money. Anyway, in terms of MedEntry versus Medify, certainly MedEntry. It came out last year, so it doesn't have that many stats about how well it is. But a lot of my students that used it last year loved it. They did a lot better than the students that used Medify. And I don't recommend Medify anymore. First of all, SJT is unreliable, QR is unreliable, AR is unreliable. The only thing they're good at is VR. DM is, but like I said, not as 100% representative as I'd like it to be. So VR is their best section. If you're struggling with VR, sure, if you're going to pay for it for one section. But MedEntry, Past Medicine, MedicMind all do the same job. So I'd use those in combination. And the thing that Asher put up on the screen, the £59 one, the UCAT Live Day, since it has the online resources for free with it, it also has some of those question banks with it as well. So if you're getting that for £59, that's good. All right. The next question was, do you have any advice on applying to med as a graduate? Yeah, a lot of my students that I tutor are graduates. And the best advice that I could give, three pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is a lot of graduates tend to underrate themselves. I'm not sure what your personality is like. I'll need to meet you to answer this personally, but they tend to apply for easier to get into universities or lower rate universities or things like that because they tend to have lower self-esteem in terms of what universities they think they'll get into. The first thing I'd say is, yes, you are held to higher standards since you are a graduate and you need to be a lot better to get in. But don't let arrogance or low self-esteem get to you. Both sides of the spectrum are bad. Make sure you invest a lot of time in the UCAT because you will be expected to be in the top decile if you want to get in. So the graduate student, the top graduate student I'm tutoring, as in the one that got the highest score, got around 3,000, and someone got around 2,800. And another one of my graduate students got 2,500. The 2,500 only got one offer. 2,900 got all three of the universities he applied to, and the 3,000 got four universities. So you could sort of consider the higher you UCAT score, the more likely you'll get in. But the UCAT isn't the end of it. You also need a lot of help with interviews, whether it's using online resources or what's his name? Karma Medic. He's really good as well for interviews. Whether it's using any of those, don't ever underestimate the interview. As a graduate, you will be expected to be smarter and have more knowledge and be more confident. So UCAT and interview are going to be key aspects for your applications. And I know it's a lot more effort to sit the GAMSAT, but it might be worth considering it if you do get low in your UCAT, because even if it's putting more effort in and it's testing you for more things, it's actually worth it. So try and expand the areas that you're able to apply. Like I did the UCAT and the BMAT because I wanted to apply as many unis or varieties as possible. Don't limit yourself to one score. You might think your UCAT score is good, but remember the deciles will only come out after you've applied, the real deciles, which means that if you apply with the projected deciles, it might not be that you're in the top decile, so you might not get in. So always have backup options to the UCAT, backup admissions processes. So to recap, focus on interviews and the UCAT and have varied options available as backup. Did you want to add anything else, Asher?
No, I think everything you said was great. And as a graduate, just keep in mind you'll probably need much higher UCAT scores. So do your best to start early and make sure you do work consistently. And that should hopefully get you a place at med school. Yep, I think we should probably end things there. It's been a really good evening. And thank you so much, Zainab. You've done absolutely great. And thank you so much, Padma and Kong, for giving us this opportunity to talk. And all of the students, you guys have a bright future ahead of you, and I wish you all the best of luck. And if you do need any help or support, then reach out to either us or SAMDA anytime. We'll be happy to help.
Good luck, guys.
Okay, so thank you so much, Zainab and Asha, for that. That was really helpful. Now we'll just finish off. So can you please scan this QR code with your phone, and this will lead you to a feedback form. And then once you complete it, we will be able to email you free resources by MedicMind that we mentioned earlier, as well as a SAMDA Applying to University booklet for this year. And this form is live until tomorrow 10 p.m. So do make sure you fill it out. If you're not able to scan the code, you can also use the link that's here on the screen. This will also take you to the form. If you have any other questions, you can always email us at samda@bartslondon.com. And if you have any questions for MedicMind or for UCAT Official, you can contact them directly, or you can also contact us and we will try and get you in touch with them. So yeah, thank you all for attending today, and we hope that you have a good evening.